start sharing and you can start letting people in, Michaela.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody that's already joining today. Please look at the chat or at the screen, and we've asked that you go to menti.com and then use the code to participate in our first activity from where you're learning from today.
Already.
Okay, cool.
Good afternoon. For those of you that are just joining us, please go to menti.com and enter in the code that's available on the screen and put in where you're learning from today. Thank you.
Nice, Crystal.
Instant.
I'm in the process of setting up my home office and so that I don't have to use a virtual background, so it'll be all normal.
For everybody that just joined, please go to the menti.com and enter in the code so you can put in where you're learning from. Okay, so I think we are going to get started in just a couple minutes here, okay? For everybody that just joined, please go to menti.com and use the code and enter in where you're learning from. And I apologize for everybody that's already been here and I've been repeating myself.
I did that yesterday with the virtual training that we had. And I'm like, I'm really sorry if I'm driving you crazy.
It's just nice to give everyone something to do while they're just waiting here. So no, we had to repeat ourselves. Wow, we have people coming in from all over. We got Hawaii and Alaska represented as well as all across the US. That's awesome.
All right, I think we still have some more people joining for us, so we'll give it another minute. All right, well, I would say we can get started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Loan Policy Development, hosted by OWISTA Corporation in partnership with Native Learning Center. And since we already did our first activity from where we're joining in from, I love that we have everybody from all over the place: New York, Colorado, Washington, Michigan, South Dakota, Hawaii, and Alaska. Let me just make sure I don't have to admit any more people, and I believe we're good. All right, so we can get started. Perfect. So welcome to Loan Policy Development, and first things first, we will do some introductions for our facilitators today. First up, we have Florence Letka, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. For those that don't already know me, my name is Florence Letka, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer at OWISTA Corporation. I am training today from my home in Traverse City, Michigan, and I am an enrolled member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And Jamie?
Jamie.
Oh, Jamie, you're on mute.
Sorry, everyone. My name is Jamie Olson, and I am the Director of Lending for OWISTA. I come to you from Clarkston, Washington. I live close to my homelands of the Nimiipuu, which are headquartered in Lapwai, Idaho. Next up is Alex.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra Shaughnessy, and I'm the Lending and Investment Officer here at OWISTA. And I'm calling in from Northern Colorado. Michaela?
Hi, yes, I'm the lending assistant, and I am calling in from Michigan, and I'm also a member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. And I'm really excited to be here today with you all. And next we'll go over some webinar etiquette. And since we are all virtually training, we do ask that if you are able, please keep your video and camera on during the training. Mute yourself so there's not a lot of background noise, and please utilize the chat. I know we're all super busy and this webinar is important, so we ask that if you are able, please limit some distractions such as phone and email. Do we have any questions so far? All right, so we're gonna do the agenda, just go over that real quick. So we did introductions, we have a fun icebreaker activity, and then for section 1 is just loan policy development, and then we're gonna go out into some breakout rooms followed by a mural activity. And section 2 is process and procedure followed by breakout rooms and a fun quiz. And section 3 is risk rating and portfolio management followed by a scavenger hunt and some conclusion and questions. And our session goals for today do include understanding loan policy development, comprehension of process and procedure, and the importance of risk rating and portfolio management. All right, so we are going to be posting a link in the chat for our first icebreaker activity. It's a spirit animal game. I really hope you all enjoy it. And once we pull it up on the screen and you can see it there, we'll kind of explain how it works. So as you can see, there's a bunch of little animals you can choose from. And the red dot in the very center by the honeybee and the seal, you just click it and drag it to where your spirit animal is, wherever. And you could have more than one, you know, multiple red dots. So yes, the sloth. Mm-hmm. Mm. And I tried to be very geographical about it. Oh, the honeybee. Yes, the honeybee would be my spirit animal, I feel. If you're just joining us, there is a link posted in the chat to go to Mural, and you can choose your spirit animal. You can have more than one, obviously. We have a few minutes for this activity, so no need to rush. I think the eagle is very popular, the bald eagle. And the otter. Alex, could you, oh, thank you, Alex. Oh, someone chose the platypus. That's awesome. I was waiting for that.
That little baby platypus is so cute. I would love to see one in person. Hello to everyone just joining us and saying hello in chat. We really appreciate your participation in this little fun activity.
Oh, and you can grab the red dot that's in the center by the seal, if that's easier for you to just, you can just drag it and drop it. All right, so we're just gonna give it a couple more seconds to decide, and then we'll move on to section 1. All right, I think I really enjoyed this activity, and I hope you all did too. It was very thought out. All right, we are going to start with section 1. which is just going over loan policy development. And Alex is going to be our presenter for this section.
All right, thank you so much, Michaela. Let's just jump right in. So in this section, we'll be covering basically the foundations of developing a loan policy. So this includes the policy's development, objectives, and elements, as well as loan types, portfolio mix and limits, geographic area, your organization's lending function structure, and your organization's lending authority. So first off, why should we care about having a loan policy? Well, an appropriate and effective policy and practices are imperative in controlling credit risk. This is mainly because loan portfolios typically have the largest impact on the overall risk profile and earnings performance of your CDFI. This earnings performance includes interest income, fees, and provisions. So with risk and earnings at stake, a solid loan policy is one of the most important parts of having a successful CDFI. In general, a current and effective loan policy is just a tool to help management ensure the lending function of your organization is operating within your risk tolerances. It also ensures your lending program aligns with your CDFI's mission and that you are conducting safe and sound lending activities. The next important part of having a loan policy is that it informs your lending staff and it ensures fair lending practices. So with your lending staff, they consult and follow these policies as they do their work and their day-to-day activities. As far as fair lending practices go, it contributes to a uniform and consistent lending practice, so you can make sure each of your borrowers is treated fairly and no one is given special or preferential treatment. The last part that you need to remember about your loan policy is that it is always board approved. So now that we kind of know why loan policies are important, we'll move on to developing your loan policy. When you first start developing your loan policy, you need to think of the main goals your CDFI has for having this loan policy. These main goals include, first of all, informing the public. So that means you will have to provide your loan policies to your auditors, investors, others providing insight to your organization. Next, as I kind of mentioned before, you're reassuring your investors. You'll likely provide your loan policies to them during the due diligence process, and having solid loan policies is really reassuring for them and leads to more or even larger investments into your CDFI. Next, as mentioned in the previous slide, it establishes a common credit culture and helps to guide your staff. It ensures that fair lending we discussed and tells your staff how to do their jobs effectively. Finally, and most importantly, the overall goal is to manage your CDFI's risk. So while risk is inevitable, policies help mitigate credit risk and assist in sound and safe lending practices. Once the policy is formulated and all these goals are met, your senior management is responsible for its implementation and its ongoing monitoring. It's also responsible for the maintenance of your procedures to ensure they're up to date for your org's current credit risk profile. Also keep in mind that your board for framing these loan policies to make sure it addresses all the risks in your organization. This is why they always have to be board approved. So next, we're looking at loan policy versus process and procedures. So it's important to note that your loan policy differs from your loan processes and procedures. Forth the plan, your guiding principles, and your frameworks for decisions in your lending activities. Procedures, on the other hand, establish methods and specific steps to perform those tasks. CDFIs that offer a wide variety of loan products and more complex loan products should really consider developing separate policy and procedure manuals for those loan products. Separating the two, policies and procedures, it's also helpful because, for one thing, the policies must be board approved. So if any changes have to be made, it has to go through that approval process, which can sometimes take a while. But procedures, on the other hand, they can be reviewed by your board, but they aren't necessarily required to be approved by them every time changes are made. So this is particularly helpful when you're refining your process and procedures and working through your loans. So a little bit more on the processes and procedures manual. When thinking of these processes and procedures, it's important to keep in mind that they will accompany your loan policies. So this enables your org to quickly react to your organizational and industry changes while still maintaining the ability to provide services. With that, you may ask yourself, well, what should go in my loan policies and what should go in my procedures? In developing these policies and separating the two documents, there's really several sections we recommend to include in your procedures instead of your policies. So just a short list, you should include description of your lending staff responsibilities, a description of your loan committee, your loan underwriting criteria, your loan approval process, your loan closing process, then your loan monitoring process and responsibilities. That's how you monitor loans after you actually close them. Your portfolio management process and responsibilities. And then finally, how to handle collections, delinquencies, loan restructurings, and even foreclosures if it comes to that point. So those are things to keep in mind when you're developing that so you can separate the two effectively. But now we're going to go back to the loan policies. And we're kind of going to start with looking at the big questions that loan policies address. In general, the loan policy should clearly communicate the strategic goals and objectives of the CDFI, as well as define the types of loan exposures acceptable to the institution, your loan approval authorities, your loan limits, your loan underwriting criteria, and a few other guidelines. Ask yourself these questions listed on the slide as sort of a guide or inspiration in developing your policy's content. So that includes, what kinds of loans do we make? What will we consider too risky in our lending? How much will we lend to one borrower? Who is going to decide what? How do we want to reserve against potential loan losses? What will we do when a loan goes bad? How can we evaluate our portfolio performance? And finally, what social impact are we trying to achieve? So just kind of think of those as you're going through and trying to develop your loan policies, and make sure you touch on each of those. So next up in developing your loan policy, you need to determine what your org will consider permissible lending activity. Permissible lending activity is basically the lending activity that is deemed acceptable or allowable by your CDFI. In determining what your org will consider as permissible, ask yourself the following questions. How can we better serve the credit needs of our community? Will our primary focus be consumer, business, agriculture, housing lending, or a mix of all of them? Next, what types of loans do we offer? What is our desired mix of loans in comparison with our total loan portfolio and our total assets on our balance sheet? Does our lending team have the appropriate skill set? Because if the lending members don't have expertise to underwrite, service, or monitor certain types of loans, your CDFI probably should not undertake such activities until you're able to get training or have people on that have experience in those. And finally, you need to state what you consider undesirable or impermissible lending activity. So identifying what is undesirable or impermissible in your loan policy, this will ensure that management and lending staff members undesirable lending activity. This could include may harm the reputation of the CDFI or any activity where your expected return for those loans does not equal the level of risk involved. So this undesirable lending activity should also include that you won't engage in financing of illegal or illicit activities. But keep in mind, policies and procedures need to be continually evaluated and updated. For example, desirable and undesirable loan types may change just as a result of shifting economic conditions, your market demographics, things of that sort. So you just need to ensure that you're reevaluating your loan policies to account for those sorts of shifts. Next, we're going to discuss loan portfolio mix and limits. So your policy should establish this desired mix on individual loan types. So this mix is also known as portfolio diversification. Portfolio diversification answers the following questions. How much you will lend to a single borrower? Will that be a percentage or an amount? What percentage of your assets will you lend to a borrower? So what exposure is acceptable for your organization and what exposure is acceptable for your borrowers? In general, your limit should be determined based on your risk tolerances and should be measured in comparison with the rest of your loan portfolio and the assets on your balance sheet. So the loan policy should also appropriately address your lending limits or your exposure. So this is the aggregate maximum dollar amount that your CDFI can lend to a given borrower. So in other terms, exposure is the total dollar amount of outstanding loans that one single borrower is able to have with your CDFI at one time. Exposure mix and limits should be monitored by staff and management on an ongoing basis to ensure that they're still appropriate and reasonable for your CDFI. As we discussed, these things change with changing market conditions, so you just need to make sure that those mixes are still relevant as those changes occur. Next, we'll be discussing geographic area. So this is where you're identifying basically your service area for lending. CDFIs are typically established to serve your local communities that you operate in. You should identify these geographic areas in your loan policy and the circumstances under which you may extend lending options outside of that area. But you have to keep in mind that familiarity with geographic area provides insight and supports management's ability to closely and continually monitor borrower performance. So that's usually more reassuring for your board of directors and your investors, people of that sort that are having oversight over your CDFI. Lending outside of your local market does help to diversify geographic exposure, but it can also raise concerns about management's ability to appropriately monitor these projects and remain informed about the local economy. So appropriate policies and procedures covering loan participations and potential concerns out of the area will help reduce, but not eliminate some of these risks. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about developing your geographic area in your loan policy. Next, we have the structure of your org's lending department. So the most important element or purpose of this section in your loan policy is that management needs to strive to maintain sufficient controls and segregation of duties in all of your lending functions. This really helps to avoid and prevent inappropriate credit decisions and potential weak underwriting processes. In general, the ability to separate the activities of the loan generation function from your credit underwriting and from your analysis function is really beneficial to your CDFI. There are definitely everyday benefits, but it's also a benefit when undergoing an audit or due diligence processes, because investors and auditors like to see this segregation of duties. Unfortunately, we know this can be very difficult and often unrealistic for smaller CDFIs, where all these activities are usually combined. So they may struggle with implementing such controls and structure just because they have limited staff or potential financial constraints for doing this. You know, we all wear many different hats at CDFIs, but it's really best to strive for finding ways to implement these controls and segregation of duties just for the benefit of your entire CDFI. Okay, and now we'll talk about the lending authority. So your loan policy should clearly define the individuals and loan committees that have authority to approve the loans you submit. So dollar limits should be established for individuals by name or by job title. It should also list individuals acting together, so they have dual lending approval authority. You'll need to list your loan committees and the legal lending limit authority. So that's for your board or your committee. Individual lending authority should be structured again by job title and also your loan product. So this really ensures that your lending decisions are being made by individuals with appropriate credentials and expertise. So no CDFI should delegate unlimited lending authority to one or just a limited number of individuals. Before a CDFI can establish lending authorities or limits, your board must establish the approval hierarchy or structure. So do certain loan limits go to just your ED? When do they go to the loan committee? And when do they go to your full board? And this is just because the board is ultimately responsible for the affairs of your organization, and they need to determine what degree they're willing to delegate that lending authority responsibility. Okay, so now that we've kind of discussed different elements in your loan policy, you also need to determine who will be managing the process of after the fact. So with that, you should consider the following. One, who should be involved? This includes involvement in developing and implementing and monitoring your loan policies. We recommend leadership and your lending department do the bulk of this, but to have general oversight from your board for just help guiding and clarifying certain things. Next, what internal documents will you need? This is the documents you need for your loan policies that will provide your staff the most benefit. This includes templates, again, your processes and procedures manual, appendices, and other things of that sort. Next, you need to think of who should decide. This means who should decide what goes into loan policies, how they're developed and implemented, and all that good stuff. So in general, who is making the overall decisions about this loan policy? Again, we recommend leadership, your board, and those with the most experience and understanding of your CDFI. So usually senior staff members or people with lots of experience in the lending process really take on this responsibility. Next, you need to think of when should you revisit? When do you need to take a look at your loan policies again? It's typically best practice to review annually to ensure it still meets your needs. Your policies don't necessarily have to be reapproved when you do this review, as long as you don't make any significant changes. But the lending department should make a concerted effort to ensure that it matches their work and the needs of your community. There's always an option to review more frequently or if anything comes up, such as economic situations or your org's strategic goals shift, things of that sort. Okay, so now that we've discussed what to include in your loan policies, now we can kind of take a look at what it looks like when you finally type it up. The typical outline for the loan policy you can see on this flow chart. So first, you'll discuss your org's purpose, lending philosophy, mission, and target market. Then go to an explanation of your loan products. Then discuss your loan eligibility requirements. Next, state your loan diversification requirements. Move on to outlining your loan rating rubric. Then state your loan approval process and approval authorities. Outline your loan loss reserve policy. And finally, discuss any applicable regulatory requirements that your CDFI might face. We didn't go into detail on some of these elements, but Jamie and Flo will do a deeper dive into them in the next sections of the presentation. But this is just a general guide to help you in writing your loan policy. Okay, and finally, here we've provided a little cheat sheet to use when developing your policies, just to make sure you include the most important content. So in general, there are 10 elements of a good loan policy, and if you include those, you'll most likely have a really solid loan policy for your organization. So first, define your mission and market, specify your lending authority, delineate responsibilities for reporting loan information, describe origination, underwriting criteria and process, state documentation for a complete credit file, state any of your collateral guidelines, explain your loan ratings and loan loss reserves, state how your interest rates and fees are set, specify your preferred upper limit for total loans outstanding / concentrations, and finally, explain how to detect, analyze, and work out problem loans. So when you're developing your loan policies, just make sure you hit each of these key elements to ensure that you're meeting all requirements that may be needed for your auditors, for your investors, things of that sort.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, you're good.
Okay. All right, so yeah, we have our breakout room activity, and we're gonna go into groups of 4, and we have 5 minutes in the room together to discuss, and then 5 minutes to report out as a whole group. And we gotta choose who reports while we're in there. So as soon as you get that notification to go into the room, you can click on it, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes, okay?
So we're just supposed to discuss the current loan authorities that we have at our institutions, is that right?
Yeah, so can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so we're gonna breakout room activity, and you guys can discuss amongst yourself, what are your organization's loan authority approval limits and why? And I can make little notes on here too.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I don't mind starting. And is this like individual lending limits or just overall loan limits? I'm at Cook Inlet Lending Center in Alaska. We will look at loans up to $250,000. Any loan that is above $50,000 does go to a loan committee for a presentation. Below $50,000 would be approved internally by our general manager, along with the loan officer, myself, and our chief operating officer as well. And that's up to $50,000. And then any loan over $50,000 does have to be reviewed by our board of directors for approval as well. So even if we go to loan committee for a loan, it's still going to have to go to board.
Interesting. Okay. And that, what kind of loan product is that?
It's just a standard business loan.
Oh, okay.
We don't have specific concentrations. We're relatively new in the small business lending. We started it in January of last year. And as we all know, last year was kind of crazy. So it's really more of a revamp of that process and a pivot of our loan policy at this point that we're looking at.
All right. Who would like to go next? Thank you for sharing, Trevor.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll go next, for lack of anyone else. We're really small. Our maximum loan is 10,000. So we've gone up as high as 15,000. It's very small. Consumer loans, and they're all secured by the per cap. So.
All right. Do any of them have to be approved in any way, or is it
Well,
just?
yeah, we've set up guidelines. They have to have the income. They have to have the per cap available. They have to have. They're approved by the loan officer and then co-signed by the executive director. We have a loan committee, but we don't really utilize them and never have. So we've kind of diminished their role in our update loan policy.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for sharing, Vicki. Who would like to go next?
I can go next. This is John. I'm with Seneca Nation of Indians Economic Development Company. We have currently 4 loan products. We have 3 of them are more centered around business entrepreneurship. So we have a micro business loan up to $50,000. We have a business revolving loan that goes up to $275,000. And we have a commercial mortgage loan that goes up to $375,000.
That was at the commercial.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
commercial. Basically, we have a loan committee that can approve up to $100,000 loans. Anything up over 100,000 goes to the board. And we also take on any application that goes over our maximum. We still encourage people to apply, and if the board feels it's justifiable, they have the right to exceed the maximum loan limits.
Very interesting.
The executive director, myself, does not have any approval authority. Basically, I help the applicants get their applications fully vetted before they go to the loan committee.
Interesting. Okay. Only approval. Okay. We have
I'll
one.
go
Yeah, we have 45
real
seconds.
quick. Consumer loans based on our policy, I can approve a loan officer and myself up to 2,500, but we launched during COVID a $5,000 consumer loan for tribal employees. And our small business loan, it goes to our committee. And then we've just recently done a participation loan that went to the full board.
Oh, okay.
Quick and dirty.
Okay. Well, we can, who wants to discuss this? I mean, I guess whoever, you guys can talk about it, Jonathan, Vicki, Trevor, and Janelle, and whoever else didn't get to speak can definitely discuss.
We've got so many different departments, and the one I work in right now, we have no loan. We have no limits on, they don't have to be a certain income to qualify for our department, but I don't do loans either.
Right.
I do know that the loan department has limits. I don't know what they are.
Okay.
We've got a rehab department. They have limits. The loan department is for lower income people, families. And I do know that if they are over our particular limits, they go outside the nation. They have different banks that they can work with to get them approved.
Utilizing essentially conventional loans or whatever the bank has to offer.
Right.
Very cool.
So I guess there really isn't a limit because anybody can apply and be approved as long as they have, as long as they meet all the rest of the criteria too. So.
Welcome back, everybody. I think, I believe we have everybody back. Okay, so hopefully you all were able to have some good conversations in the breakout room, and we'll just discuss a little bit. So group one, Jamie, or I mean Flo, did you guys decide who you'd like to discuss, who you'd like to have discuss the question?
Yeah, Janice is going to do our report out for us.
Okay.
So I guess we were just, there was a few in the room that were just listening and getting ready to start establishing their stuff. So they were just there to take notes pretty much. And then there was also a group, I think, that was more updating what they have in place and doing those types of things. And then I talked about our company, and we do have these things established, and we are kind of going through and updating and adding some things to them at this time also. I don't know if you wanted me to go through that stuff, but that was the gist of our conversation in there. Sorry, I'm not a good one.
No, you did great.
Yeah.
I would just add that we talked about loan limits being like smaller limits, so 5,000 or 10,000 is like one loan officer. And then, you know, we would go up from there, and you would need to like more of a committee if you're giving away more, like 50 or 100,000 is the only thing I would add.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Jamie's group.
Yes, Russ is reporting for group two.
We had several in our group who are just starting out, emerging CDFIs, no established loan policy, no established authority limits. Fund has some well-established loan policies and some well-established limits on authority, as does Sequoia Fund. Ours, I think, are pretty low, and we just discussed that we're getting ready to change those limits, hopefully tomorrow. So lending authority is on the board agenda. But yeah, Fund has limits of authority up to prescribed levels, as does Sequoia Fund. I don't know how much detail you wanted us to go into there, but they voted for me to say something, so here I am.
I am curious, Russ, what is your threshold of your approval before it has to go to a committee or the board, and the same for Tala funds? What are your limits?
So right now ours are low. Ours are 5,000 up to 5,000 at the staff level. Anything above 5,000, except in certain, we've got a couple of emergency loans that the board gave us authority last year up to 25,000 that we could make that were COVID related. Then everything else, the loan committee recommends to the board. So for well over 21 years, our board has voted on almost every single loan. We're going to change that tomorrow, where at staff level, we have authority up to 10,000. Loan committee will have authority up to 50,000, unless there are special circumstances. And then above 50,000, the board will make those decisions. And we lend up to 150,000 on commercial loans.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing that.
Alex, do you have someone who'd like to report?
Yes, Tani volunteered to share. So Tani, you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so the theme in our room was all over the place, right? Some actually didn't have those approval limits set up. One microloan fund had very specific loan limits, which I'll share that out. It's as the general manager, they could approve up to 25,000. And then at 26 to 75, it goes to the loan committee. Anything above 75 would have to get approval from the board. And then let's see, we had a CDFI intermediary in the group who talked about those limits being set by the funders sometimes. It really just depends. And then with Shoshone Bannock, they have a limit of 3,000 that they can approve outright. So just a little bit all over the place. Some have a lot of structure, some are still working on it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Tani. So for my group, I guess I just told them that they could all talk about what we talked about. I did take notes. So I think Trevor from Cook Inlet, if he wanted to talk about a little bit what we went over. But yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
We do have lending policies established, and we lend up to $250,000 small business loans, and any loan that's over $50,000 would go to our loan committee along with our board following for final approval. Internally, we can approve loans up to $50,000 for small business loans at Cook Inlet.
Thank you, Trevor. Vicki, just real quick. Jonathan or Janelle or someone who did not get to speak.
Sure, I can say real quick. Our company just basically has a loan committee that can approve up to $100,000 for loan applications. Anything above $100,000 goes to the board as a whole. We mainly do the business loan products. So we have a micro loan up to 50,000. We have a business revolving loan up to 250,000, and then commercial mortgage loans up to 375,000.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so we have to just move on real quick to some wrap up of our section and then answer some questions. I hope you all enjoyed the breakout room activity and getting to know everybody's policies.
Yeah, so just a quick wrap up. Thank you everyone for sharing. So first, remember, auditors, funders, and investors expect CDFIs to establish and maintain loan policies. So that's really the important part of developing these loan policies appropriately. Next, they provide an effective framework to measure, monitor, and control your credit risk. But you also need to keep in mind that CDFIs don't need to start with a blank slate. There are a lot of templates and resources out there that you can use to kind of get started. And finally, it's really important to tailor your loan policy to your organization's own activities, just because everyone does things a little bit differently or has different activities. So even though you can use those templates, just always make sure they work for your CDFI. So does anyone have any quick questions or anything like that from the section we just discussed?
I do.
Okay.
Real quick, for all those that have multiple tiers of approval, whether through loan officer, executive director, and loan committee, do you guys have any policies in regards to aggregate accounts? So let's say you have a person that has a $10,000 loan already with you, and they applied for maybe another type of consumer loan for $5,000, but it supersedes the threshold in the aggregate. Do you guys still have certain policies set up that it's account for as a whole, or does it account for per application?
Generally, you would want to set a threshold of the maximum amount a borrower can, one particular borrower can borrow from you. We do have CDFIs that do not have a threshold for that amount, but it is our recommendation that you would have some sort of threshold. And then you can always have an exception, to a policy for that threshold if that's deemed necessary and important in order to or to really help someone out. But it would be, definitely my recommendation to have some sort of single borrower threshold that you have established. To give you an example, at OWISTA, borrower threshold is 15% of our portfolio. So we're not allowed to lend more than 15% of our total portfolio to any single borrower. And then that helps diversify your portfolio and to keep it more, less risky, because you don't have all your money or all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, or in just a few baskets. Did that help answer your question?
Kind of, I guess what I was looking for, if you have a applicant that already has probably, let's say, $20,000, which might be something the executive director can approve up to that area, and then another application comes in from that same applicant for $5,000, what the loan officer can approve. Does the loan officer able to approve that $5,000 loan, or does it have to go to the executive director for approval, because aggregate it's beyond the?
Yeah, so when you set up loan approvals, the only one that would be aggregate would be your single borrower threshold, your single borrower limit, but it is not aggregated. Generally, I've never seen it aggregated, at least by loan. So if you have internal approval authority up to 20,000, there could be 10 loans. As long as they don't exceed that single borrower threshold, you do not have to have that. That's usually not aggregated. Okay, are there any other questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next activity.
Yeah, so we are posting the link in the chat. It's just posted, and it's our mural activity, and it is timed. So once it's pulled up on the screen here, basically there's a bunch of white boxes with phrases that have to do regarding either policy or process and procedure. So the green box on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right-hand side is for policy, and you'll just slide that, grab the box and put it on, let's say, well, I don't want to give anything away, but whatever you think needs to go there. And then the blue is process and procedure. So I'm going to time it, and we have a minute. Okay. Oh, that's okay. You might have to move that, Alex. Oh, there. Oh, no. So you guys just pick up the little boxes, the little tiny boxes, the green and the blue. And then there you go. Yep, you got it. Okay, I'm timing now. 1 minute. Yeah, so just grab the little boxes and put them where they belong. And then I lied. I'm making it in a minute and a half. So you have 30 seconds longer. And then we can kind of start to talk about it a little bit here. So there is only one correct answer. Both process and procedure doesn't go with the policy. So I see we have loan approval processes in the policy, and then process and procedure. And same with the description and structure of the loan committee. Quite a bit.
So I'm going to offer a little bit of clarification on some of these things. So board approval, you only need board approval for your loan policy. You would not need board approval for your processes, for your loan processes and your loan procedures. So that's why we recommend that you actually separate out process and procedure from policy. In the past, for many years in our industry, processes and procedures have been combined with policy. But the new best practices surrounding this really have your processes and procedures, your lending and anything to do with that separated out from your actual loan policy. So I wanted to offer a little bit of clarification on that board approval one. Also, your geographic area will always be in your policy, not in your processes and procedures. And then strategic goals as well, those would always be in your policy and not in your processes and procedures. Any other questions that we can answer here for any more or additional clarification? Okay, great. Thank you for participating in that. We are going to go ahead and move on to section 2 now. And thank you so much, Alex and Michaela, for that first section. And Jamie, our Director of Lending, is going to be presenting section 2.
Hello, everyone. I just needed to unmute myself here for a second. Thank you for joining us for a training today. Like Flo said, I will be reviewing the loan policies and procedures section 2. But what we'll be covering in this section, next slide please, is financial information needed to be collected from the borrower, collateral, perfection of collateral, pricing, policy exceptions, loan commitments, loan approval and closing, and maintaining credit files and documentation. So your loan policy development should be very comprehensive, covering all of these areas, and should provide clear guidance to your lending staff and your loan approvers. Next slide. We're going to just start out with a question, and you can answer the question in the chat. What types of traditional or non-traditional or unique collateral has your organization accepted from a borrower to secure a loan? Anything besides the normal collateral, such as a car for an auto loan or their primary residence for a mortgage loan. Have you ever collected anything that might be unique as collateral to support a loan?
We used some sheds. They were well built, like fancy garden sheds, so to say, but they were valued, so we used it. We did a UCC filing on them.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's people can come up with some really creative ideas. In the chat we have Trevor states, currently we're reviewing a loan request which would be valuable mammoth tusks as collateral, which is really interesting. And then jewelry and artwork. Russ? Russ, is that for real?
You asked. You had to go there. We have cattle, but we also have pre-cattle.
Ah.
Could you explain?
I wouldn't rather not.
No, I meant, could you like explain how? No, I don't mean. Could you explain how that's working for your organization? Like what exactly it is that you're sterilizing?
Sure, Flo. These are held in cryogenic storage. And so the storage facility, they're in straws, and each straw has a barcode. They're numbered, they're trackable. because these are beef cattle. You want to know where your food comes from. And so everything is traceable, and we can keep an inventory floor where they can only go below, I don't know, Dorian could tell me the number, but they can only go below so many straws before the storage facility has to notify us. And so if they hit that floor, we still have our collateral, but they can't use any more of it. So we're protected. And we did this because they had another lender who stepped in and disposed of our collateral. They sold off our beef cattle and replaced them with different UCCs.
Interesting. And what type of loan? What type of loan is secured with this collateral?
It's a farm loan.
Okay, great. Interesting. Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Next slide, please. So for underwriting criteria, in its simplest form, is the loan approval process that will drive the lender's assessment and determination of the borrower's creditworthiness. So when your underwriting criteria is strong, the loan portfolio should perform better and credit losses will hopefully be minimized. Smaller lenders offering just a few loan products may want to include key loan type specific underwriting criteria or standards within one document, typically one general loan policy. But like what Alex described, for larger or more complex lenders, to separate policies, procedures, and documentation requirements is a best practice that corresponds to different loan types, such as commercial real estate, residential tract development, asset-based loans, or commercial and industrial type loans. But no matter where policy underwriting criteria are included, the analysis of any borrower should address the basics of extending credit, which of course includes the 5 C's, such as character, the integrity of your borrower, capacity, do they have sufficient cash flow to service a new debt obligation, their capital or their net worth, the collateral, what assets are you taking to secure the debt, and conditions, the conditions of your borrower and the overall economy. Next slide. Financial information. The decision to lend should be based on the borrower's ability to repay an obligation. So loan policy must establish what type of financial information is required from a borrower and also guarantors, both during the application process and then while your credit remains outstanding. If you're going to be collecting ongoing monitoring information, you'll need to determine the frequency, monthly, quarterly, or annually, with which information will be collected, established, and the personnel that will be responsible for collecting the information. A business borrower will typically be required to supply more information than an individual borrower applying for a consumer loan. So of course, key sources of information include tax returns, financial statements. Business borrowers, financial statements should typically be prepared by an accountant or a CPA. And a lender may also require additional or more detailed information to assess the borrower's financial condition. If you do have any additional or special reporting requirements, those should also be articulated in your loan policy. The policy should specifically address the free and refreshing borrower credit reports from credit reporting agencies. Next slide. Collateral. Collateral is a very important piece of policy if you're going to be doing secured lending. And common consumer collateral is listed on the slide, but your loan policy should discuss acceptable and unacceptable collateral for each loan type you offer. And the policy should also discuss the documentation requirements that you need to obtain for acceptable collateral. And that also will support your ability to exercise a perfected lien. Next slide. Real estate is a common form of collateral for both consumer lending and commercial lending. If you're doing home mortgage lending or commercial real estate lending, the most important element of your collateral is obtaining a credible valuation of the real estate property being pledged to secure your loan. Real estate evaluations and appraisal requirements must be incorporated into your lending policies, and all required processes must be in place to secure the real estate as collateral and subsequently monitored to ensure compliance, such as annual insurance policy renewals with adequate insurance coverage, listing the lender as the loss payee. That will protect you against any damage to the home, such as a fire or a tornado. If you are listed as the loss payee and the insurance policy is activated, then the lender would be repaid for that loan if the home was destroyed. Loan policy must address acceptable real estate valuations and thresholds. Their real estate loans are typically longer terms. So with a longer term loan, there could be changes in market conditions of real estate values. So typically you're not going to lend 100% of the value of real estate. So in your policy, you will need to state what your acceptable loan to valuations will be and at what threshold. There are different types of valuations for real estate, which you should become familiar with and should also be addressed in policy. You can do evaluations, and there are different types of appraisals, residential appraisals. And then for multifamily properties, such as apartments, those are considered commercial real estate. And so there are different types of commercial real estate appraisals that you would want to articulate in loan policy. For institutions that are FDIC regulated, there are federal guidelines that cover real estate valuations, and other lenders may also have regulatory oversight and must incorporate any regulatory oversight into loan policy. Next slide. For your business loans, you can also take collateral, and common collateral are accounts receivable, inventory, equipment, investment securities. In some cases, you may also common collateral, such as maybe specialty vehicles, boats, or precious metals. But regardless of the type of collateral that you accept, the loan policy should be clear about what is acceptable, your collateral loan to values, which should also include discounts based on the type of collateral and specific procedures for evaluating and monitoring your collateral. So when you're discounting collateral, what you're thinking about is, if I ever had to take this collateral back because we are not repaid on our loan or the borrower defaults, what could I realistically sell this collateral for quickly? And so you'll discount loan. You're not going to give 100% value to accounts receivable. You're going to discount it because you may not be able to collect 100% of the accounts receivable if you ever had to actually take collateral back from your borrower. Valuations do need to be performed by credentialed individuals or experts in that area. And the collateral value should be deemed prior to loan approval or set as a subject to in your loan approval prior to loan funding. Policy should require that borrowers regularly report on secured collateral, and loan documents should ensure that lenders are able to gain access to collateral at their discretion, and borrowers are required to maintain and preserve that collateral held by the lender and maintain the proper levels of insurance coverage. Policy should also describe how frequently collateral valuations will be performed. Typically, the valuation will depend on the size of the loan, the type of collateral, the location, and the established controls over the collateral. The borrower's overall financial condition could be a key factor in the timing of a collateral valuation. If you see that a borrower is deteriorating in any way, you may want to check on the collateral that you have in place to secure that loan. Your loan policies and procedures should also address foreclosure and liquidation of collateral. Next slide. In general terms, your loan policy should outline the steps to secure collateral and including who will be responsible for that within your organization. So performing a lien and title search prior to accepting a borrower's asset as collateral will advise you if you will have first lien position, which typically is the preferred lien position to be in when you secure collateral. Occasionally, some loan types do allow for a second lien position, and your policies would outline that. You may discover in your search that a prior lender is showing as a lien holder after they have been paid in full, and then you'll need to go back to your borrower and have them go back to their prior creditor and request that they release the lien. You will not be able to take a first position lien until all prior liens are removed from the collateral. Be aware that if you do refinance a loan and need to maintain first position, you would need to file a continuance. Collateral perfection may vary from state to state, but all states have adopted Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, which provides guidance on secured transactions. So your policy and procedure should clearly specify the filing requirements. And since timing differences and filing locations vary from state to state, just be aware that failure to file a financing statement in a timely manner and or in the proper filing location could compromise your security interest in the collateral. Typically, you secure real estate through a deed of trust, and that is filed through the appropriate local authority. In our area, it's through the county. Prior to securing real property, you'll want to make sure that you conduct a title search, which should be required in your policy and can be obtained through a local title company to understand if you're working with a clear title. There could also be right-of-ways, encroachments, and other legal entitlements to the property that you're looking at security that may need to be considered prior to you accepting that real estate as collateral. Next slide. Loan pricing. So loan policy should provide lenders with guidance on how to appropriately price each loan type for both interest rate and loan fees. Your loan policy is going to be what provides the guidance for your lenders to appropriately price each loan product that you have. And there are a number of variables beyond what we can discuss today that actually affect pricing decisions, but they should include loan type, payment structure, and borrower relationship. There are many different types of pricing strategies, and we do stress that your leadership and management ensure that appropriate pricing structure is established and implemented for each loan, and also that pricing should be evaluated and adjusted in response to any change in costs, competitive factors, or risks of a particular product type or borrower, and also the current rate environment. Next slide, please. This is just a sample of a cost plus pricing model, which is a simple pricing model. It is made up of 4 components. The first component is cost of funds. So what is it costing your organization to lend to this? What are the costs of the funds that you are re-lending to your borrower? What are the operating costs associated with servicing the loan? What does it take? The risk to your pricing? And then also, what is a reasonable profit margin on your capital that you are lending? So your loan policy should provide guidance to the lender on how to appropriately price a loan and what approval authority is required if recommended pricing is outside of loan policy guidance, which takes us into our next section, next slide, which is policy exceptions. Loan policy should establish processes and procedures for non-conforming or exception loan requests received from credit-worthy borrowers. To ensure compliance with auditors, funders, and investors, loan policy needs to establish the review and approval procedures for exception loans, such as, say, a loan where the loan-to-value percentages exceed the limits that you've set in your loan policy. Policy exceptions in any mitigating circumstances should be well documented and presented to the designated authority for approval. All approved exceptions should be appropriately tracked and monitored on both an individually and collective basis. Frequent policy exceptions could indicate credit underwriting and or a policy that is too restrictive. The underlying reasons behind frequently granted exceptions should be assessed and appropriate action should be taken to ensure the policy is appropriately conveying the desired risk profile. Next slide. All loans approved should be made in accordance with your established underwriting guidelines and should be conveyed to the borrower. If you're a business lender, typically a loan approval is provided to the borrower in the form of a commitment letter. While a commitment letter is not a promissory note, it is the document that contains the terms and conditions under which the lender will agree to extend credit and should be agreed upon by both the lender and the borrower before you move forward with a loan closing. It could be that during the process, there was a misunderstanding and your borrower may have thought that they were going to be receiving different terms or a different rate. And so you'd work through that through this commitment process. And then if you do have to go back and revise your commitment letter, you need to make sure that if you need to get approval for any changes, that it goes back to the owners before you make any changes to your commitment letter. But next slide, please. After you have an agreed upon commitment letter, then you can proceed with your loan closing. So after you've retained either a loan approval for most consumer loans and a commitment letter for business loans, then you can now route your approval to your doc prep team or whoever prepares the formal loan documents in your organization. You'll want to review your loan documents before you take them to your borrower. You want to make sure everything is correct. And then it's preferred that you meet with your borrower and you go over your loan documents because your borrower needs to understand exactly what they're obligated to do in both, the loan agreement and the loan promissory note. And so you want to feel good about their understanding in going into the loan before you close and have them sign the documents. After you do get signed documents, then you can disperse loan proceeds. And that also needs to be explained to your borrower because loan proceeds may be going directly to a third party or perhaps directly to your borrower. And at this time, you would also discuss any subsequent reporting by your borrower. If you felt like your loan had some risk and you needed to stay in touch with your borrower, you might want to set up some credit monitoring where you would at least maybe engage with your borrower at least once a year and perhaps collect some financial information where you could determine the continued appropriateness of the credit. And also, if it were to come up that you would need to grant an extension or a renewal, you would have a good understanding about where your borrower is at through loan monitoring. Next slide. Loan policy procedure should also address credit files and credit documentation. The credit file is the repository for all information, both financial and collateral, that is pertinent to extending credit for the entire period that the credit extension remains outstanding, and then also for a period of time after your loan is paid off. Within the credit file, lenders should appropriately document the entire relationship and provide internal and external reviewers with all of the information necessary to analyze the credit during its life. The policy should identify who's responsible for collecting and maintaining all the required information during the life of the loan and also specify who is responsible for reviewing the adequacy of the loan documentation. The policy should also contain procedures for identifying, citing, and correcting documentation exceptions and parties responsible for carrying out this task. If your organization is audited, then your auditor will need access to all your credit files because they will be taking those credit files and cross-checking your documentation against your loan policy to ensure that all of your loans you've been making during the period being reviewed are compliant with your loan policy. Next slide. So now we're going to go into a breakout room activity where we'll be asking a couple more questions regarding policy exceptions.
Yeah, so same thing as last time. We're going to have 5 minutes to discuss and then 5 minutes to report and assign who gets to talk. So as soon as you get that notification, just join the room. We're back. Okay, we should totally choose who's going to talk.
Nominate Jonathan.
Okay, me too. All right, so the big question, what are some of the policy exceptions your organization has made in approving a particular loan? What was the loan and why did you make that exception?
Real quick, I'll go. We haven't made any policy exceptions yet. So
I was gonna say the same thing. We haven't done it either.
We haven't done any.
We have, and we are a new CDFI, so that's probably not a great thing. And the exception was the size. We have such a small amount of lending capital right now. We set our maximum loan amount to any individual at 10,000, and we've had to do an exception to that.
What is the name of your CDFI?
Jamestown Sklallam Tribal Capital, JST.
Yep, I've entered in that name before on my spreadsheet. Very interesting. What was the loan? What was the loan product? Was it just a?
Well, this was just one of our first loans, and although we have a lending limit of $10,000, we did a loan for a piece of equipment to one of our tribal and one of our construction business that is tribal enterprise, and it was a used dump truck, and it exceeded the loan value. But since everything else was within the mission, we did the loan with board approval.
Well, that seems like an all right exception.
But it really just lets us know that hopefully we should amend our policies to increase our lending limits.
All right, there you go. Very interesting. Does anybody else want to say anything about their exceptions that they might have made before?
My name is Dion Deshawn. I'm with the Port Gamble Sklallam Tribe, and we are just developing our CDFI. So unfortunately, I'm not able to offer a lot of input on how it's operating since it isn't yet.
Thank you for letting us know. I wish you the luck, and I hope that you're learning a lot.
I am learning lots, and it's great to hear how everyone else has structured things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Jonathan, do you have all that down?
So Joanna's the only one that had exceptions, and it was due to you need to expand your overall limits to make it so you don't have to have exceptions. That's pretty much the gist of it.
All right, perfect. So if you guys want, we can leave the breakout room, and we can just, I don't know if you guys have the same option, but I'm just going to click leave breakout room, okay? All right. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had good discussions. We'll just wait a couple seconds until everybody's back in the main session here. And then we'll allow group one, which I believe Flo was in, whoever the presenter was for group one with Flo, can go ahead and discuss any exceptions that your group talked about. Hey Flo, who was the presenter?
Gonna, Courtney's gonna do our report out.
All right, perfect.
So I was just trying to keep a list here so I can remember them all. But we talked about changing the debt to income ratio because someone's perhaps been a longtime member or has other great experiences and reputation. We talked about the activities and the exceptions of the activities and where and what might qualify as an exception or how to change the product to better fit the activities. And then we talked about security. So if the vehicle or the loan they're trying to get doesn't really offer much security for our organization, it's maybe more risk for us to try to ensure that. We would go more with an unsecured option, perhaps, and still maybe allow that lending to happen, but change its exception or change the type of product we're offering them. So I think that was, I'm maybe forgetting one or two other examples we gave, if others want to jump in. Otherwise, that was pretty close.
Thank you, Courtney.
And then group 2, whoever was with Jamie.
Yes, Natalie's going to report for group 2.
Okay, well, I had Russ out there the first round, so he threw me out there the second round. I missed the very first part because my niece is here, my little tiny niece, and but so if I miss anything, somebody else chime in. But I heard that one of our attendees made some they made exceptions to the policy due to COVID and some emergency loan situations. And also another, which I think was Russ, said that when you're doing like a $50,000 loan and that's your ceiling and they come in at 55, you don't want to leave them hanging so that they're going to, you know, fail. So you want to make sure that they have the amount of loan that can help them be successful. And this other situation is with us is the credit builder loan. It goes up to 10,000. And the loan board has deviated to, instead of putting a little Band-Aid on the situation, it might be a bigger situation. And so it wouldn't help them. And so they started doing deviations if the risk, you know, was mitigated. And so it eventually led to just a credit builder loan. It's also a debt consolidation loan because that's what our customers, there was a lot of them coming forward. So it kind of told us we needed a new product. Is there anything else that our group had?
Thank you. All right, group 3, who is ever with Alex.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share for my group. A good chunk of our group is brand new to this, and they are actually in the process of developing their loan policies or getting them board approved. So many of them haven't had a chance to make a policy exception yet. They're just here to learn. So it's super exciting that they're getting started and developing their loan policies. We did have a couple similar to the other groups where they made exceptions for a debt to income ratio that was a little bit higher, or the time at an employer wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And then there was also another interesting one where they were providing emergency loans for COVID. And one of those requirements was they had to put that on a report to the credit bureau, I believe. And some borrowers didn't want to do that. So they had exceptions made to where they didn't have to report. So yeah, that was group 3. Michaela, you want to go ahead with your group?
Yeah, it's our rock star Jonathan. He's up.
All right, so most of our group didn't have any exceptions. Joanna did bring up that her company had one exception, I believe, that the exception was basically exceeding the maximum loan amount. So the thought process is probably either increasing the overall loan limit or potentially maybe coming up with a new product. But nobody in our group really had any other exceptions. So
All right, thank you. So
Great, thank you. Sorry, Michaela, I'm just gonna jump in here. I just wanna make a couple of comments here in regards to this. So exceptions are totally okay to your loan policy. There's always, as we've heard in this report out, there's always gonna be different things that come up that are going to require an exception from your loan policy. When you're developing your loan policies, you're not going to be able to think of everything and you're not going to be able to accommodate everything within the policy. Your policies are a guideline that you want to follow. But there can be exceptions and that's okay. When you're having every loan that you're underwriting and every credit memo you're preparing has an exception in it outside of your policy, that's when it's time to review your policies, to rewrite your policies, rework them, and to perhaps add some new parameters or new terms or different terms, or even in some instances, some new loan products or a different loan product. So it's the amount of exceptions that kind of really determines whether it's kind of okay or you need new policies. One of the things that I want to stress here is that you do want to include a paragraph in your loan policies that allows for exceptions. So you want there to be some kind of verbiage in there that says that your lending committee and your organization will look at loans that fall outside of this policy on a case-by-case basis, and that any loans that fall outside the policy will need loan committee and or board approval. So you do want to have that verbiage in your loan policy that allows for exceptions, but I wanted to kind of emphasize and explain that exceptions are totally okay because things are going to come up and you're going to need those. You're going to need that flexibility in order to meet the needs of your community, but it's the number of exceptions. So I would draw the line at it. Like I said, if half of your loans that you're underwriting or trying to get approval on are exceptions from your loan policies, it's definitely time to revise your loan policies and to rework them.
all right, if there is any more questions about the section we just went over, please let us know, because we're going to do a quick quiz and then we're going to do a break. So if there's any more questions, ask right now, okay? And then the link is going to be posted in the chat, and you do the quiz by yourself and then we'll discuss after, okay? And she just posted it in there. So I'm going to mute myself and not talk so you guys can think. We're gonna give it a few more minutes for people who are still finishing up, okay? Okay, just a couple more minutes. We have people still working through it.
Okay, so I think almost everyone is done with the quiz. If you're still finishing up, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and share the questions and results so we can go over the correct answers and kind of discuss if you have any questions about that. Okay, so the first question we had, a loan policy must address all of the following key decision criteria except, and most of you got it right, it was auditor functions. The other options, they do need to be addressed. But your auditor functions, yes, we do need loan policies for the auditors, but you don't need to address their function within the policies. Does anyone have a question about why that's the correct answer? Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. This one is the decision to lend should ultimately be based on what? And the correct answer is the borrower's ability to repay an obligation. Because that's all we do with lending. We give them the money and we want to make sure they can repay it. The borrower's relationship with your organization is important, but that shouldn't be the ultimate deciding factor when approving a loan. All right, so the next question, true or false? Documentation required when applying for a loan is universal. So the answer is actually false. There are some key documents that are typical to be included, but not every single piece of documentation is required. That just depends on the types of loans your organization is doing. And it also depends on, your approval criteria for those loans. Does anyone have questions on that one? All right. So when extending credit on a secured basis, the lender should, the correct answer is all of the above. They should ensure appropriate collateral valuations are obtained, an appropriate lien is filed, and confirm the value of the collateral is sufficient to cover the outstanding balance of the loan. So almost everyone got it right. Some people got portions right, but we need to include all of those just to ensure that the collateral is good and your loan will be fully secured as it should be. Luckily, no one chose none of the above, so good job. All right, so next, true or false? The most important element of managing real estate collateral is obtaining a credible evaluation or appraisal. This is true. So Jamie stated it in her section where the most important piece of your real estate collateral is that appraisal, so you can get that proper evaluation and know how much the collateral is worth, and so that you can properly secure it to be used with your loan. All right, so next, most transactions secured by personal property and fixtures are governed by. This one was a little bit tricky. It wasn't on a slide, but Jamie said it in as she was speaking. The correct answer is Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code. So the loan policies, they do give you instructions and can give you guidelines, but the actual securing the collateral is governed by this article. Right, so next, establishing a reliable risk rating system will assist with which of the following? The correct answer is all of the above, and most of you got that. Risk rating systems help make appropriate lending decisions and provide sound monitoring criteria of the borrower's financials, and they help in determining appropriate loan covenants. Okay, so this one was another little bit of a tricky one. A typical cost plus model will consider which of the four components. The correct answer is the first one. It will have cost of funds, reasonable profit margin on capital, operating costs, and risk premium for default risk. So this one we actually have a slide on. So when we send that, the copy of the PowerPoint presentation to all of you, you'll have that for reference. So just keep that in mind. All right, so next, exceptions to policies and procedures should receive the appropriate level of approval and be documented in writing in order to ensure compliance with what entity? The correct answer is all of the above. You want to make sure that your auditors, your funders, and your investors know why you made that decision as they're reviewing. If they're doing any sort of due diligence or auditing, things like that, you need to have a reason for why you made that exception. So you can kind of think of, you provide your loan policies to those three entities, and then you also have to document why you would make those exceptions. All right, so next, loan commitment letter is another word for promissory note. That is false. Commitment letter is what you send to the borrower to kind of go over the loan approvals, where you discuss like all the terms and everything and make sure everyone's on the same page. And the promissory note is actually the legal document that the borrower signs in order to receive the loan. Next, when maintaining appropriate documentation, credit files should include which of the following? The correct answer is all of the above, so good job. Almost everyone got that right. So we need to make sure to include all of these in your credit files if you have them. We will go ahead and do that when we send the presentation out to you guys.
All right, I hope you guys all enjoyed the quiz. We're just going to do a quick wrap up and then answer some questions.
So to wrap up section 2, as previously mentioned, lenders are expected to have and maintain policies and procedures that provide an effective framework to control risk through sound underwriting criteria, appropriate file management, applicable regulatory compliance, and sound documentation. So we've talked about a lot in section 1 and 2 and provided some examples. But we want to stress that the importance of tailoring the policy to your organization's loan activities is critical. So your underwriting criteria, along with your credit file maintenance and documentation, is by no means all inclusive. And so when you are writing your loan policies for your organization, you want to make, because everybody is kind of unique and does things maybe a little bit differently, or has different types of product mixes, or has a different type of lending philosophy. You'll just want to make sure that your loan policy is not just generic, but is specific to your organization and what your organization is trying to accomplish. That concludes section 2. Are there any questions?
Will we offer this again? So do you mean the training in general again? Yes.
Yeah, we're hoping to be able to offer this one and the one that we did a couple weeks ago as well about underwriting 101 in the future.
And then Joseph asked, we mentioned earlier that there's templates out there. Are these available at OWISTA, and is there a specific person to contact?
We can send some templates over to you. If you want to send me an email, florence@owista.org, I'll make sure my team has the information they need to send to you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do a quick.
Oh, one more question. Does OWISTA do on-site consulting work and updating process and procedures?
Yes, we do. If you're interested in that, you can again contact me, florence@owista.org. I'll put it in the chat for everybody. And if those of you who want, we'll kind of, when we send out this PowerPoint, we'll include some templates to everybody. So it'll kind of take us a couple days to get that ready for you. So expect it early next week sometime, by midweek, let's just say. And then we're gonna go ahead and go on like a 3-minute break. I know this says 5, but we're running a couple minutes over. So I'm gonna give you till the 55 minute. So at 2:55 Eastern time, we'll start section 3. Thank you. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. Hopefully, you all had a long enough break there just to refresh your water and just get up away from your computer for a few minutes. There are a couple of questions in the chat that I want to address before we get started in section 3. One is from Brooke asking about cash flow analysis platform. And if anybody has any recommendations for names, I personally use Excel and our accounting software. So I don't use a specialized analysis platform. Is anybody on the webinar? Does anyone have any suggestions? Russ, maybe you're using something different?
I mean, we just use a spreadsheet as well. We've got a cash flow projection spreadsheet that we require everybody to complete. I mean, we know if somebody wants to open a hot dog stand and they want to make $1 million a month, it's probably not realistic. So we just look for what is reasonable.
We can, Brooke, if it would be helpful, if somebody on my team can make a note, we can include our template, our cash flow template that's in Excel, and send that over with the rest of the documentation. And then the other question was, when including borrower correspondence in a permanent credit file, how do other native CDFIs do this? Do you print every email and keep it in the file, as well as electronically saving correspondence? I will say that for your permanent credit file, all of the emails are not necessary to be saved in that. Mostly what you want in the permanent credit file would be your promissory note, your loan agreement, your collateral information, if necessary, the credit application, any of the documents you retrieved or requested when you were doing your due diligence and your credit memo preparation. But it's definitely not necessary to keep every single email and all of your correspondence. I will, however, say if you are interested in doing that, a system called LenderFit out there will do all of this for you, where you can track everything and save every single thing. And it actually creates your permanent loan file for you electronically, and it saves all of the correspondence, even every single email back and forth. So if you are interested in having something like that, there is a program out there that will do that for you. Are there any other questions before we start section 3? Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started then. Next slide, please. So this section mostly deals with post-loan origination risk management, the activities and the tools that the loan officers, the portfolio managers, and your board of directors and your executive team will use in order to effectively manage the CDFI's lending program. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with asking everybody a question. You can either unmute yourself or put it in chat, but why do we risk rate loans? We got some really good answers in the chat. Protect our assets, maintain knowledge of the portfolio risk, monitor portfolio health, to have a fair and equitable process, manage our risk and determine our loan loss reserve. All of those are really great answers and correct answers. Next slide, please. So this is these are the main bullet points of why we risk rate loans. From a management perspective, it's really to understand the risk in our portfolio, because no matter what we do, no matter what kind of due diligence credit memo is, no matter how strong a loan application is, there's inherent risk anytime you loan out money to anyone. Another reason is to understand trends in risk. So we might notice through risk rating loans that certain loans are more risky. We may notice that at certain times of the year, loans are more risky. We also may notice in times such as what we're in now with the COVID pandemic, that loans in a certain segment are particularly more risky. We also use risk rating loans to compare risk levels from loan to loan, and not only loan product, loan to loan, but also from the demographic of the borrower. We also use risk rating to figure out who we need to monitor more actively and more frequently. So which loans are at greater risk that we need to take a closer look at on a more regular basis. And it's really also risk ratings are to be used by your lending team and your board and credit culture within the organization, and so that it's a fair and equitable process across the board. From an investor perspective, it really shows our investors that we're conscious about our risk and that we know that it's out there, and we are aware of it, and we are kind of accounting for it and kind of tracking it and keeping an eye on it. And next slide, please. So a key element of a sound monitoring framework is a well-defined and adequately documented risk rating system. Well, risk rating systems can vary significantly based on your portfolio size, your loan composition, and your loan product complexity. Management should ensure that risk ratings are accurate and reliable. The reason for this is because ineffective risk ratings could result in weak portfolio oversight and ultimately result in increased credit losses. So the risk rating portion of your loan policy should include all of the following items. It should provide the foundation for credit risk measurement, monitoring, reporting. It should support management and board decision-making. It should be sufficiently flexible to allow for use with various types of credit exposure and different types of loans. It should provide appropriate granularity of risk ratings that accurately reflect the risk of default and credit losses. It should offer multiple pass grade options as appropriate for the complexity and risk of the portfolio that adequately differentiates the pass risk ratings. It should precisely define risk rating criteria using both objective and subjective factors. It should consider both the borrower's expected performance and the transaction structure. And it should be independently validated based on real historical lending trends. Next slide, please. So when you're designing your loan rating system, there's 5 steps to doing so. Determine your rating criteria. The second step is you're going to determine scoring for that rating criteria. The third step is you're going to determine a mapping method for those scoring categories in order to put them in to either lettered or numbered risk ratings. The fourth step is you're going to test your loan rating system, again, by using real loans that you've actually made. You're going to see what the results of that test are, and if necessary, go back and adjust your loan rating system. And then step 5 would be to implement this. In order to implement your loan rating system or a new loan rating system or an adjusted loan rating system, again, you're going to introduce this to your board to get approval because this is part of your policy. And once you do that, you can implement it and start using it on all future credit memos. And then step 2, or excuse me, next slide. So I'm going to just explain a little bit about step 1. And if you recall from this different steps, step 1 is you need to choose your rating criteria. This is just a few factors to consider when you're developing your risk rating system that we recommend. So the first one is you're going to want to isolate factors that have traditionally accompanied delinquencies or defaults or foreclosures in the past, either from your own loan portfolio or perhaps maybe some of your peers at other CDFIs. You also want to be careful not to choose the multiple factors that address the same type of risk. You also want to be careful about the number of rating criteria that you use. Too many factors could be a burden, and too few could result in not meaningful test results and not meaningful risk management criteria in order for you to be able to really see what's happening. The other thing is you want to confirm correlations between the factors that you selected and the actual results. And again, you use historical loans that you've actually made, over the past 12 months or a season or a fiscal year or however you want to do that. But when you're doing these risk ratings, you test it on real results and actual loans that you made. Another consideration is you want to make sure you consider the costs, the time and the money of evaluating factors, because you want to make sure it's not going to be too overly complicated and too time consuming during your underwriting and your future post-closing monitoring of the loans. And next slide, please. So this is just a couple of ideas or a couple of sample rating criteria, and I focus mostly on consumer lending with these. It would vary differently for housing loans or agriculture loans or business loans. But if you were doing consumer lending, this is some of the criteria you might want to use in your risk rating. So credit score, the ability for auto payments, like auto payment deductions for the loan payment, like such as payroll, or perhaps from their per cap, their character, the collateral, credit references, including non-traditional credit references, and their credit history. And then there are some other rating criteria out there too that I have not listed on here. Can anyone think of anything else, or does anyone use anything else other than what I've listed here? Just go ahead and unmute yourself to answer that question or put it in your chat. Russ, go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, we take into consideration the economic environment of the community as well. So such as like competition, how close they are associated with their closest competitor, those types of things to associate the risk as well. But everything else is exactly the same.
Okay, great. Russ, do you use anything else for your risk rating for consumer loans other than what we have listed here?
We're just now starting to do consumer lending. And no, this matches what we have.
Okay, how about you, Janice? Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, this is about what the kind of stuff that we're using also, yes.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, next slide, please. So what I've included here is kind of a sample for step 2 of developing your risk rating structure. So step 2 was all about scoring. So on the far left of your screen, you're going to see the loan risk criteria that I chose. So again, I was careful of my numbers. I didn't want to have too many. I didn't want to have too few. And I wanted them to really be based on what I thought we could use going forward to risk rate our loans. So Fico score, collateral, equity, character. I threw in one here for business history in case we were going to be underwriting a business loan, and then personal debt service coverage. So I broke down the scoring by Fico score. So for example, if your Fico score was 700 plus, you got 5 points for this particular risk criteria. If it was 650 to 699, you only get 4 points. 600 to 649, you get 3 points. 500 to 599, you get 2 points. And then 0 to 499, you get 1 point. Same with collateral, and I based it on loan to collateral value after the discounts for liquidity and excluding the collateral that was previously pledged to senior parties in a loan, such as like a home equity loan. The first mortgager would be the senior party in that. So if your loan to collateral value was 110 or greater, you got 6 points. And then 100 to 109, 4 points, 90 to 99, 2 points, and then 0 to 89, 0 points. The equity, this was mostly for business capital for a business loan. If you had 20% equity, it was worth the most points at 5%. If you had, less than 5 to 1.5, you only got 1 point for that. Character, this can be used for both business and, consumer lending. If they have a really strong character and are really well known and really respected in your community, then you might want to score them a 5 for this. And if not so, or you didn't know this person very well, they might only get a score of 1. Business history, the operating years in business. If it was greater than 2 years old, they got the highest score. If it was a newer business, they got, only a 1. And then the personal debt coverage. This is the monthly income divided by their fixed monthly expenses. If it was 2 or more, they got the highest score. And then less than that, it went down from there. So as you can see, when you're doing your scoring structure, you need a low and a high, regardless of what the criteria is that you're using. And then you need a maximum and a minimum amount of points. And then you need a scoring section where you are actually going to score this particular client or loan client or this loan application and give this loan a risk rating. And next section, please. So in this section, we're talking about mapping to an actual rating. And I happen to use alphabetical terms for my ratings. I went A through F. So my A loans are really strong. My B loans are still sound, but not an A loan. My C loans were adequate. My D loans were substandard. My E loans, I had some doubt. And my F loans, I had highly doubtful. It does not mean that I wouldn't loan or I wouldn't make this loan to anybody. It could be that I would make every single one of these loans that fell into this. It would just really depend on the circumstances. So depending, you would want to assign a score to each one of these loan categories. And again, you don't have to have 6, you can just have 3 if you want. You could have 5, you could have 4. There's no limit here. I wouldn't recommend more than 6. But this is where you would score them and you would have your score parameters. What is the score from the previous slide that I want my A loans to be? What is the score that I want my B loans to be? And so on and so forth. So you're going to assign points for each risk factor. You're going to have the minimum and maximum that we showed you on the previous slide. And then you can also even include weighted factors. Like you could have some of your risk rating criteria be worth more than other criteria, depending on what you value more and depending on what the historical information is from your previous lending that you've done, or even like your peers, your other CDFIs, like which one of those rating criteria is most important, which one has the biggest impact on whether a loan gets repaid or not. And then next slide, please. After you do those first 3 steps, you're going to move on to steps 4 and 5. Steps 4 and 5 is where you test it. You choose a representative sample of 10 or more of your past loans, and you apply your proposed loan rating system to those, and you see what the results are. And then you go back, if you don't get the desired results, you go back and you kind of revise the first 3 steps and kind of retest the factors and adjust it until you get it just right to where you want it and right to what makes sense for what's actually happening in your organization with your loan portfolio. And then number 5 is to actually implement it. You actually change this in your policy and get your required approval. And then you start using this as risk rating when you're moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to move on to some other sections of your loan policy. One of the important sections is monitoring framework. So in order to promote the appropriate risk identification, measurement, and monitoring, your loan policy should clearly identify and establish procedures related to ongoing management of the loan portfolio. In other words, ongoing loan monitoring. Monitoring and reporting on the performance and collateral of the loan should start immediately following dispersal of any loan proceeds. And then the monitoring framework in your policy should include an assessment of the compliance of the CDFI's underwriting criteria. This would include testing loan covenants to evaluate whether the borrower is complying with loan covenants or is in technical default, and whether the repayment of the principal is expected or in a jeopardized state. And next slide, please. Management information system and reporting. So this is another a real important part of your loan policy. You'll want to make sure that whatever system you are using for managing your loans, whether that's T or Down Home or LenderFit or anything like that, you want to make sure that that's spelled out in your loan policy. You also want to spell out what types of reports you're going to produce, when you're going to produce those reports, who's going to produce those reports, and what's going to be included in them. This slide kind of goes over some of the things that you want to report on. You want to report out on you kind of want a dashboard, like what are the total loans and commitments you have? What's your pipeline right now? Do you have any loans in excess of existing credit limits? Extensions or credits or restructured loans, you want to also include that in your reporting. For sure, you want to include delinquent and or non-accrual loans, and all kinds of just whatever you can think of. You want to make sure that's included in the section that you're reporting out on it. Next slide, please. You also want to make sure you talk about internal controls, such as audit controls, loan review controls, and credit administration. These all play critical functions and an important role in maintaining effective loan monitoring throughout your entire process. Your loan policy should also establish a system for loan review to confirm that your credit policies and underwriting procedures and your internal rating assignments are being thoroughly reviewed by your loan committee and your board. Next slide, please. This is your audit function. It's super important that you include something in your policy regarding this, but you really want to be doing annual audits. And if you're currently not doing annual audits, you want to make sure that you're moving in that direction. Eventually, as your organization grows, you're going to have to do an annual audit. So it's better to start putting these policies into place now so that you're following all of the compliance issues from the get-go, from the minute you start lending or going forward with your lending to make sure that you have compliance. Next slide, please. The loan review function is also really important. This plays a critical function into providing an overall level of credit risk, and also make sure that you're overseeing the effectiveness of your risk rating system and your plan. It also helps you identify the potential risks that could negatively impact your portfolio going forward. So the responsibility for underwriting and structuring a loan according to the policy and for confirming that the loan is performing to expectations really rests primarily with your lending team. And that's why that loan policy should include that loan review function, so that everybody makes sure that everybody's doing exactly what they're supposed to do that's related to the policy. Next slide, please. And then this credit administration, this really has to do with the exceptions that we talked about earlier. Your loan policy should establish clear processes for requesting, approving, and documenting policy exceptions. So you want to make sure that there's a paragraph at least in your loan policy, as we talked about previously, that allows you to do exceptions and what the process is surrounding that. Next slide, please. The next slide, the next section of your loan policy really should be about problem loan workouts. The main objective to this is to enhance or preserve your overall position with respect to cash flow and collateral. And it also helps you detect early problems as they arise. And we have learned, through our peers and through best practices, is that the earlier you can detect a problem with a potential loan, the more successful you're going to be at actually collecting that loan. And next slide, please. So we have found through historic lending and through our peers, as well as best practices, that if a loan is going to go sideways, it usually happens in the first 2 years. That doesn't mean that it can't go happen after that. It can happen at any time. But usually if it's going to go bad, it does happen in the first 2 years. And a lot of times it happens with the first payment. Sometimes you never get a payment on a loan that you made. In other instances, it could be related to payroll deductions or automatic payments that weren't set up properly or that are just taking a little bit of extra time to get put in place. Again, the best solution is prevention. So invest early and often in the relationship with that client. Have those loan monitoring processes and procedures in place so that you are able to get on top of it right away and have that loan not go into default. And then, of course, there's restructuring and payment plans. These should only be used for borrowers that are experiencing unexpected financial crisis that still have the ability and commitment to repay. You don't restructure a loan to a loan client that you don't hear from and that you can't get in touch with. Next slide, please. Resolving delinquent loans. So the resolution outcome really depends on the reasons for the delinquency and what your loan policy says. There's really two things. There's loan restructuring and there's payment plans or different payment plans. Some of other possible solutions could include extensions of your next payments, change in the terms of the loan. You could rewrite the whole loan and start over for them, perhaps lowering the terms, lowering the amount of payment every month. There could be a voluntary repossession or an involuntary repossession. You could seek judgment on that. You could transfer to a loan.
So, oh, she's back.
Okay.
Froze just for a moment, Flo.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is some of our best practices for payment plans and restructuring. As I mentioned earlier, get ahead of the issue early. And you should only do payment plans and restructuring as not as last ditch efforts. You should, as soon as somebody is late, you want to be having that open relationship, that open communication with them, and really kind of put those things in place ahead of the time. And normally payment plans and restructuring never work as a last ditch effort. So that's why we always kind of emphasize like that continually and that process for doing so. You want to limit the number of times your organization permits payment plans over the life of the loan before just restructuring it. So if you did a payment plan, a special payment plan, they were able to meet all of those. They requested another one. That's totally fine. but maybe limit that before you just go into just kind of restructuring the loan on a permanent basis. Again, also you want to limit the length of time a payment plan is in place. We recommend best practice of no longer than 3 months generally. You can extend it and have another 3-month period and even another 3-month period after that. But after that, you definitely want to look at restructuring. You also want to track separately and adjust your risk ratings appropriately anytime you do payment plans and restructuring. So in other words, if you have to do a payment plan or a restructure for somebody, you want to make sure that you're adjusting your risk ratings down, because if that loan is in greater risk than you originally thought, if you're having to do a payment plan or restructuring. And next slide, please. Last but not least, we just want to emphasize it's super important that you follow your loan policy. It's actually required for any type of audit compliance, for board compliance, for native CDFI compliance, for the NAHASDA award compliance. You have to follow your loan policy. All of these things, there's checks and balances in all of them. And so you want to do that. You also want to, again, I'm going to talk about exceptions because we all make them. You want to make sure you're making exceptions only with the required approvals. So you want to make sure that that's documented in your loan policy, that you can do that, and that you are obtaining the required approvals for any exceptions that you are making. We do have one question that I'm going to address in the chat. It says, can you give an example of a special payment plan? And I can. A special payment plan might be interest only. So where you have a loan client that can't make their loan payment, and so you agree to take 3 months of just interest only payments with no principal on that. And really that was just one example, but there's you could do any array. You could let them skip a payment and add it on to the end of the loan, the end of the term of the loan. You could lower the amount of interest and extend the terms of the loan. Just all kinds of various different things like that. So I hope that was helpful. And next slide, please. So we're going to go back out into breakout rooms, and I'm going to let Michaela explain this.
Yes, so I did post a PDF in the chat. Please, everybody, open it, and you will have to save it to your computer, and that's fine. And have it open, and make sure that everybody has that saved before we do the breakout room, so that there's no issue there. And once we get into the breakout rooms, each facilitator, the 4 of us, are going to be in there, and we'll have some questions for you, and you'll need to go on your own little scavenger hunt as a group and answer some of the questions. Was everybody able to download that document? Or does anybody need help? You can't see it. Here, I'll send it again. Carrie, are you able to see the document? Okay, Joy got it. Not in chat. Send it one more time. Sharon, Carrie.
I see it in my chat a couple of times.
Yeah, you should be able to just click on the document and it'll automatically ask you to save.
Those that aren't able to see it, we're going to try to share it in our own individual breakout rooms.
Yep, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna do 10 minutes discussion, and then we'll talk about it afterward, okay? Hi. So was everybody, okay, so Carrie is not, okay. So I'm gonna share my screen so we can all pull it up here. So our questions are, we have 4, or no, we have 5. So the first one is, what is the mission? And we have to find the page number and summarize the mission of the organization. The next one is, what is the approval authority limit of the CEO and CFO? So for those of, can you guys let me know who has not been able to pull up the document from the chat?
I have it, Michaela.
Okay. So I will scroll then for those of you who have not.
I have one too.
Okay.
I do too.
So basically you look over the policy that was sent. I wonder if I can resend it in this chat. Let me just. Okay. So yeah, okay, so let's scroll down to the mission here. I'm like giving it away. Okay, so yeah, first question, what is the mission, and then the page number? We need to summarize it. So for those of you that do have the, what was that?
It's on page 6.
Page 6, okay. Page 6. Perfect, there we go. And then we can put in the summarization later. So then what is the approval authority limit of the CEO and CFO? And what page is it found on?
Page 14.
Page 14.
It's on 13, loan approval, and then goes on 14.
All right, yes, we have our loan rating rubric and then loan approval. Okay, perfect. So what is the approval authority limit?
For who again?
For the CEO and CFO.
New loans of 100,000 or less in compliance with the policies, and loan renewals for borrowers in compliance with all existing covenants, including renewals of lines of credit.
Okay. Okay, and then what are the terms of the agriculture loan? That is our next question.
Page 8.
Page 8. Right there, agriculture loan term up to 7 years. Okay, the last one. What are the annual fees for the line of credit and working capital loan?
Page 9, 150.
Page 9. And we had line of credit and working capital. Okay, and then the annual fee was 150 for the working capital and
100 for line of credit.
100 for line of credit. Perfect. So now we just need to summarize the mission. I'll pull it up here.
So to make loans to Native American tribes, nonprofit organizations, and other local and regional economic development organizations.
Okay.
And I would say we could abbreviate that to make loans to the tribe's partners.
That's a good idea.
To tribe partners. Got it.
To provide educational and development services to the target market.
to provide education services to the target market.
And to provide data to educate investors and general public about the needs of economically distressed communities and how to invest that money.
Okay, and to provide data for the investors to
I would say to educate investors and the public about the role of investment capital in restoring communities.
I like that better.
in the role
Of restoring.
of restoring.
I can't remember what I said. Something communities.
Okay. Service of restoring needed. There we go. I'll just put that. Okay. And then I just need to double check that I had this properly in here. Loan restructure. Okay, got it. Yep. All right, cool. So this, I'll show you what I put down for our answers here. All right. All right. Does everybody agree? And then who would like to present?
1, 2, 3, not it.
I don't mind. I can present.
All right, Trevor. I'll share my screen. I'll share this when it's time. So.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Cool. So I don't know how much time we have left in here, but if you guys would like, we have just a couple minutes, so we can. I'm going to go back into the main session if you guys want to. Okay. All right. Okay, it looks like almost everybody is back. We're just waiting for Jamie's group. And I hope everybody's scavenger hunt was successful. Flo, if you'd like to have share your screen for your, yeah.
Yeah, is everybody back?
Jamie's not yet.
Okay.
Oh wait, maybe she is.
Can we end that? Can we end that breakout room, Alex?
Yeah, they're gonna close in 30 seconds.
Okay, great. So I had, oh, I probably should wait for them, right?
All right, they all should be back now.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everybody. So we're gonna get started with our report out right away. And we're going to start with group 1. And Joy is going to report out what we found.
Sorry. Okay, so the lending philosophy was on page 5. And White Buffalo has a high tolerance for risk and is primarily an unsecured lender. Its objective is to develop quality, lasting relationships and to provide excellent holistic service to its customers. And it has an emphasis on relationship lending rather than transaction lending. And then ineligible borrowers. White Buffalo does not provide financing to community members who distribute loans to businesses or individuals engaged in the following activities: illegal activities, predatory or usurious lending practices, sorry about that, speculative enterprises, pyramid or networking schemes, fraternal organizations, production on distribution of violent, unsafe, or pornographic materials. And that was on page 11, I think.
Yep, it was page 11.
And what constitutes an ineligible borrower? Is that right? Is that what I'm working on now?
No, the next one, what is the first in loan portfolio diversification concentration limit?
Well, the 25%, and that was on page 12.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one is, what are the risk rating criteria factors?
Yeah. Market and programs, mission and strategy was 10 points, market and programs 10 points, financing, methodology and performance was 25 points, underwriting 6, risk management policies and procedures 8, financing performance 11, staff and management 15, capitalization 10, finance and operation 20, board and governments 25, total loan rating was 100. And then what are the risk criteria? That was okay. And that was on page 13.
Yep, correct. Very good. Thank you, Joy, for reporting that out.
Yep.
Okay, and Jamie's team is next. Group 2.
Can you see group 2's answers on the screen? Okay.
Yes.
So they split up the sections, and Henrietta found the investment area on page 7, which is covers the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. And Henrietta also found the single borrower limit, which is 15% of White Buffalo's loan capital. And Ella found the working capital loan terms on page 9, and we just cut and paste them into our answers. So working capital can be used for any purpose. Allowable uses are lending and operations in keeping with the mission of the borrower. Loan sizes up to $250,000. White Buffalo's total exposure limited to no more than 30% of the applicant's total assets. The repayment structure is quarterly interest payments only, principal due at maturity, and can be renewed. The term is up to 10 years. The rate is cost of capital plus 5%, 3.5%. And the cost of capital is defined as the weighted average cost of White Buffalo's debt dedicated to lending at the time of loan approval, and it has an annual fee of $150. And Charatina found the answer to our last question which was, what are the points required for a risk rating of 1? And there were 2 different risk ratings. All loans, except for the first in loan, the low was 90 points, the high 100 to be rated a 1. And the first in loan, the rating went a little bit lower since there's no history with a new borrower. So they might score a little lower, but that rating, the risk rating for a 1 for a first in loan was 80 to 100 and was found on page 13.
Thank you, Jamie. Alex is up next in her group.
All right, so our first question was, what is the mission? So we found that on page 6, and it's right here. And it says our mission is to make loans and grants to Native American tribes, to provide educational and development services to the target market, and to educate investors and the general public about our lending. So the next question was, what is the approval authority limit of the CEO and CFO? So our group found that on page 14, which is right here. So we have a little table where it has CEO and CFO. So those approval limits are new loans of 100,000 or less in compliance with policies, and loan renewals for borrowers in compliance with all existing covenants, including renewals of lines of credit. And there's a few other mix and matches here. So then the next question is, what are the terms of the agriculture loans? So that one we found on page 8. So it starts on page 8 right here. And the term for this one is up to 7 years. All right, and then the next one, what are the annual fees for the line of credit and working capital? That one is on page 9, and it's just right here at the bottom of each of the tables. So the working capital is 150, and the line of credit is 100.
Alex. So I don't know how it happened, but my group had the same questions as Alex's group in order to find. So Trevor, if you'd like to report, or we don't have to, it's up to.
Yeah, she answered everything exactly the way I would have answered it as well. So great job, Alex.
Okay.
We just had a super group. Good job, team.
Yeah, good job, everybody.
Great job.
And then we're going to do a quick wrap up and some questions. And then before anybody else signs off, we're going to take a screenshot of all the participants so everybody's aware of the plan.
Okay, so we're just going to do a quick wrap up of section 3. So for most lending organizations, the credit risk profile is directly correlated to the quality of our loan policies. So the policy and procedures should be living documents and reflect current and emerging credit practices. Management and the board should continually monitor and evaluate the loan policy to determine that the organization's lending activities are conducted in a safe and sound manner that are aligned with its strategic objectives, the current market practices, and the economic conditions. For the development and annual approval of the policies, many other staff members within the organization are responsible for executing the board-approved strategy and policy. An effective policy provides the roadmap for all staff to align their efforts with the lending organization's strategic direction. So that kind of wraps up section 3. And actually the whole presentation, but we would like to open it up for questions now. For anyone who has any questions, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat too.
I may have missed this in the beginning, but is there something specific regarding audit function that needs to be in the policies?
It doesn't, so audit function doesn't have to be in your loan policy. But I would recommend that it is in your loan policy. And the reason for that is that depending on the volume of loans that you're doing, if you have a really large portfolio, I strongly recommend that you have an annual audit. If you aren't having an annual audit, I would definitely recommend that you move in that direction, because as your loan portfolio reaches certain thresholds, an annual audit is going to be required. So it's best that you have those compliance issues in place from the get-go, instead of having to rebuild them in order to prepare for an audit at some point down the road. So it's always best to have it in your policy that, yes, we are going to seek an annual audit. Part of our annual audit is going to review our loan compliance with our policies, and kind of move forward like from there. Because what happens is, if you don't do it from the get-go, you have kind of a nightmare on your hands preparing for an audit when and if you do have one going forward. So it's always best, if you can, to have that audit function right in your policy from the get-go, and to plan as if you are going to have an audit. And even if that annual audit doesn't start for a couple of years, you are at least following the policy, have all the documents in place, so that when you do have an audit, you're going to be able to provide everything that auditor is going to ask you for. And you won't have to go back and like rebuild anything or kind of jump through hoops to make it happen for the audit.
Thank you. But it's a good idea, I guess you're saying, to say in the policies that as practice, we do conduct an audit, or it's done annually, or this is what the audit's for. That's basically just what is included.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct. Are there any other questions that we can answer?
I don't have a question, but I did want to throw a shameless plug in for LenderFit as well. You mentioned them earlier, and we utilize LenderFit exclusively at Cook Inlet Lending Center. And it is an incredible system. The owner, the management is great. They're great to work with. And so if there's anyone that is looking for what you could call an origination system or a technical assistance management system that is client facing, then you definitely need to check out LenderFit.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor, for that. OESTA's just now, we are in the onboarding process for LenderFit.
About that a couple of weeks ago, so it's pretty exciting to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, like, how many applications you do in a month? Because when I was looking at it, it wasn't feasible.
So this is, so it's kind of a unique usage that we started using it for. We historically, our company has been more of a residential mortgage company, where we ventured off to business lending last year. Due to COVID, we were asked to administer some grants for the city of Anchorage, and we processed to the tune of close to 2,000 applications through that system last year with relatively ease. It captures documents, it can upload documents. It's a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah, we at OESTA are super excited about streamlining our application process, as well as being able to document all of the correspondence we have with our borrowers. So we're super excited about it. And for those of you that are doing large volumes of loans every month, I highly recommend you checking in to the system. If you're only processing 1 or 2 loans a month, it's probably not feasible. But if you're doing large volumes of loans every year, I think it will definitely streamline your application process, streamline the communication with your loan clients, and it will also allow that document retention. You'll have all of that in an electronic file, and that will suffice for any kind of audit compliance, any kind of funder, grant reporting compliance, different things like that. You can also do loan monitoring through that by, you can have like follow-up information. Like for example, those of you who are OWISTA borrowers, you know that we have a quarterly borrower report that you fill out for us every quarter. And that's going to be going over to LenderFit so that you do it through there instead of through our our current Otis portal. So it definitely does have a lot of potential. One of the biggest things I loved about it when I was given the demo was the ability that it can calculate, different percentages, different financial ratios, different things on that, like that, as long as you build it into your form, your application form. So that's really, really helpful information to have. It will eliminate a lot of my underwriters' time that they have to spend, doing those calculations currently, and kind of just really streamlining it. It also, the portal for your loan applicants is very user-friendly and works really slick and it's really smooth. The name of the software is LenderFit. So it's just like it sounds, LenderFit, all one word.
They do partner with another company called Down Home Lending Solutions as well for servicing. That is pretty popular as well.
Yeah, so Down Home is like your loan software. That's what manages your portfolio for you. LenderFit is your loan application process. We used to use Down Home as well. Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. I'm going to hand it back over to Jamie.
Thank you everyone for joining today and participating and listening to our loan policy development webinar. We'd like to just take this moment for you to share any golden nugget or aha moment that you might have had during the training. You can post in the chat or you can unmute yourself and speak.
This is off topic, but Joanna, your baby's so cute.
Thank you. Sophie.
The new normal, right? Kids at work.
Take your baby to work day
Right,
again.
every day. I just want to say thank you for the training, and it's a great refresher and a great way to test our knowledge and really go back to our loan policy to reevaluate some areas that are deficient now that kind of exposed some things. So thank you.
Thank you, Trevor, for sharing. So again, thank you so much for your time.
We have to get a screenshot.
Yeah, we do have to get a screenshot. And also, there'll be a follow-up survey that we would like for you to take just a few minutes to complete.
Yeah, I've already just dropped the link into the chat, so you can grab it from there and get all the information.
And if you would like to contact us, Flo did put her email in the chat, but it's also right there on the slide. You could jot it down real quick for any follow-up questions you might have or any additional training you might need on this topic.
All right, I got the shot, so everybody's good. Everybody's fine.
We weren't ready.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest you stop sharing.
Hold on one second.
Hey, everybody smile.
Hold on one second. I just got to get this together. All right. Everyone smile. Look at your cameras. I guess it's the best way to say. Smile real quick. I'm going to take a couple pictures. 1, 2, 3. Stay right there. Don't move. Smile. Everybody look at the camera still. All right, good. I got a screenshot. Got photos. This should all be done. Perfect. Thank you so much.